Hello, everyone, and today it is time for me to discuss Big Brother 16. So, I should give a little backstory. I watched Big Brother in the past, but it was never a very consistent watch until I watched this season live. And then I got really bored really quickly, so I rewatched all the other seasons and gained a better understanding of the season. I didn't like this season, and seeing its influence on future seasons was disappointing to say the least. But I honestly came in this rewatch with a fresh, open mind, hoping that I would like it more than I did live 9 years ago, and I hate it even more now than I did 9 years ago. But it did kind of make me appreciate Big Brother 12 more, since while it's very similar, there are a lot of entertaining elements in that season that's just not here. What stood out to me even more were the scripted as F diary rooms and how they really kicked it up this season, even compared to the last four seasons. The season was way too long. The misogyny stood out to me even more, and the lack of self interest in the gameplay was a sight to behold in a very bad way. Of course, after the backlash of Big Brother 15, they wanted to change the season and to make it lighter, and they didn't even really accomplish that, to be honest. This was the first season without the nomination wheel. This was the first season that was filmed in HD cameras. And this was the first season with the changed intros where they didn't show the evictions in the intros. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other stuff. Week one was a fine week. It wasn't one of the more boring ones compared to most of the succeeding weeks, but it's not one of the more interesting week ones compared to most of the other seasons. But I guess that's par for the course comparing Big Brother 16 to the other seasons. So it is a two-night premiere event. Paola talks about being a DJ, which is a man's world, and wants to manipulate all the guys. Donnie is a groundskeeper and has a simplistic, scheduled life. Cody talks about being a professional soccer player and talks about wanting to meet cute girls. Polly is in his intro, and he mentions that his dad was a Big Brother fan, which I guess makes sense. I forgot about this detail. Frankie talks about being Ariana's brother, being a Broadway star and a dancer, though he isn't going to tell anyone about his sister, and is a YouTuber. Amber talks about being an athletic country girl and she has a gun. Nicole is a small town tractor girl who's quirky and a superfan since she was 8. Devin was a baseball player but is a full time dad now and has athletic ability and charm that will do him well in the game. He thinks he looks better than The Rock, which, okay. Joey talks about how much of a left wing Democrat she is and how she wants to meet hot guys. Cody talks about how much he likes Donnie and his accent, though Cody would refuse to nurture this relationship throughout the season, even though Donnie wanted to. And Frankie and Joey like one another and the shared similarity of dyed hair. They try really hard to set up a showmatch between Paola and Cody, which thankfully doesn't go anywhere. Nicole seems to like Donnie due to being similar, and Frankie has a crush on Cody. Amber mentions that she likes Devin as well, and Devin likes Joey. Devin and Paolo lead a conversation about the 8 of them needing to stick together, and of course they all agree to it, though this goes absolutely nowhere. But for some reason, Devin, Cody, and Frankie are doing shirtless sit-ups for everyone. Devin approaches Danny with the final two alliance, which is called the Double Ds. Cody and Frankie are starting to get very close, and Paola cockblocks the conversation, since she doesn't want a brigade and wants it to be girl season. Wrong season for that. Paola talks about the girls needing to stick together with Amber, Joy, and Nicole, and they make a girls' alliance, which goes nowhere, and it shouldn't have included Nicole in the first place. Julie introduces them to the Battle of the Block twist, where just because you are HOH doesn't mean you are safe. Amber ends up throwing the HOH competition to Frankie without making a deal, so right idea, not the best execution, so he's one of the two HOHs. Victoria is a photographer and a designer who moved here from Israel when she was 8. Caleb is a country boy who looks like Robin Thicke and likes hunting. Brittany just got out of a 10-year marriage and has 3 kids. Christine is a barista who likes being a nudist and is married to the love of her life, which doesn't age well with what Christine has since released about her marriage, or her first marriage, and is a Big Brother fanatic. Derek talks about being an undercover cop who looks younger than his age, which, not really. Zach just graduated from uni, is unemployed, and doesn't need friends because he only cares about himself, and is a liar. Jocasta is a mother and a minister preacher, and I also think she mentioned that she's bisexual briefly, which I guess makes sense since she does kiss Nicole later on in the season. Hayden is a pedicab driver who gets along with everyone and was a straight A student. Caleb talks about how hot Amber is. Hayden compares Devin to The Rock, Amber to Whitney Houston, and Cody to John Travolta for some reason. Cody seemingly likes Brittany, and Frankie doesn't think he'll get along with Caleb for being conservative, where Frankie is seemingly bonding with Victoria. Paula is speaking to Caleb to try to see where his head is at, and Caleb mentions that he will never throw anything in the house, which interesting strategy, I guess. Donnie is making bird sounds to not be targeted, and Derek is bonding with Brittany about being parents to young children. Zach and Frankie are speaking about a school that they both know, and they're getting close, though Zach is being passive aggressive about Frankie being rich, which doesn't help Zach's case and is one of the many examples of Zach putting his foot in his mouth this season. Hayden mentions that he isn't going to throw anything in the house, which interesting strategy, but it all ends up with Caleb winning the HOH and Frankie realizing that he needs to work with Caleb, making it clear that he doesn't care about the original 8 alliance. Julie explains the twist to the cast where the HOHers will nominate a house guest, but the nominees will compete for safety, and whoever remains safe will dethrone the HOH that nominated them, who can still be nominated, but people who win Battle of the Block are safe for the week. We also learn about Team America, where 3 people will be forced to do tasks throughout the season, and Dre was voted to be the first person in Team America. We see Christine and Nicole bonding because they are simple girls who don't bond about makeup and wear glasses. So unfortunate that they don't show their pick-me behavior much on the episodes the entire season, since a lot of people think Nicole started acting this way on BB18, which is far from the truth. They talk about how they'll be friends outside of the house, and we know that doesn't happen. Anyways, Frankie and Caleb decide to work together, and how no one will expect it. The duo pull in Devin, and then decide to pull in Derek, who isn't sure about making an alliance so early, since they don't know one another. And they are interested in recruiting Cody, Zach, and Hayden, though Hayden doesn't last in this alliance, to call it the Bomb Squad. We also have Caleb calling the girls not smart, but Zach is in, and Cody is apprehensive, but doesn't know if they will be the brigade or the moving company. Caleb makes a lot of sexist comments in the season and in the episodes about women that doesn't get a whole lot of focus. Nicole and Christine want to bring in another person, and we see Devin and Donnie solidify their alliance, while Devin is trying to manipulate him. Caleb mentions that he wants to nominate Brittany because she fake smiles, and he also insults the woman once again, and they eventually agree to nominate a guy and a girl each. Caleb nominates Donnie and Paola for eviction, and Frankie nominates Victoria and Brittany for eviction, since they were the first 2 people to fall off in the HOH competition. Victoria is shocked, since she was under the assumption that she and Frankie were working together. Caleb is getting teary-eyed from the nominations, and most of the guys have to cheer him up, and Frankie reassures Victoria that she isn't going home, and he's claiming that Caleb made his nominations first, so he cannot nominate who he wanted to. Victoria seemingly and shockingly doesn't buy it. Devin ends up pulling Christine and Amber in the Bomb Squad alliance, since he thinks pulling in 2 of the stronger girls would be smart, where he doesn't even tell his alliance about it beforehand. Devin wakes Caleb up out of his sleep to tell him about pulling in Christine and Amber, and that they know everything. And despite everything, Christine is claiming that her true alliance is to Nicole, and this ages like milk. Devin tells the other guys that Christine and Amber are full-blown Bomb Squad alliance members, and of course, none of the others feel good about this move. For some reason, Devin wants to target Donnie now, since Donnie was making jokes where everyone was doing yoga, and he doesn't believe Donnie's story. Frankie and Zach think that Devin is way too paranoid and is getting worried about Devin. Brittany and Victoria win Battle of the Block, causing Frankie to be dethroned. Donnie and Paola are of course sad that they are still on the block and next to one another. Caleb definitely sees Donnie as a threat, as he performed well in the Battle of the Block competition, but Devin thinks that his charm is holding the alliance together. Devin is still convinced about Donnie being an actor and isn't falling for the sympathy stuff, as he, as well as Caleb, think that Donnie was a part of the military due to his socks, and Frankie is making fun of them in the DR. Devin is questioning Donnie about his life, and Donnie tells him that he's been truthful, but doesn't get why Devin doesn't trust him, which makes Devin emotional in the diary room. Joey approaches Amber, Jocasta, Brittany, and Paola about how there's an all-guys alliance, and that they need to start an all girl allies, which causes many of the girls to be standoffish. Derek knew something was off when he saw the woman in the washroom, and he mentioned it to Caleb and Devin. Amber read out the girls' alliance stuff to Caleb, and Joy was the one that started it. Very ironic, since Amber somewhat did the same thing a few weeks later, which would eventually cause her downfall. Joy knows that she is an outsider and that her girls' alliance idea didn't work out, so she's trying to joke about it, and she outright tells Devin it, trying to apologize to him about it. He's calling her the worst player in BB history, which is ironic coming from him. Donnie ends up winning the veto, and I do notice the increasing corniness and scriptedness in the diary room. Caleb isn't worried about Donnie winning, since the secondary target, Jory, can go, and she knows that she is in trouble, so she is doing damage control, but Caleb is shutting her down. Donnie takes himself off the block, and Jory is named the replacement nominee. Joy is of course doing her campaigning to the other house guests, and Devin wants it to be a unanimous vote to make sure Jory leaves, so no one knows about the alliance. Him asking people about the vote is rubbing them the wrong way. Christine mentions to Jory that Caleb and Devin are running everything, and Nicole mentions that Jory doesn't know much about Big Brother, so keeping her wouldn't be bad. Zach tells Jory that Caleb and Devin are running the house, and that he's voting with the house. Jory decides to dress up like a man to make her pitch about to stop being afraid about the power, or of the power, where she dresses as Alex, quote unquote. Devin actually hides from quote unquote Alex, and people think that she is a weirdo. We have an unfortunate segment about Caleb's cringements with Amber, and him telling a bunch of people about it. They talk, and he mentions that she looks at him a lot, where she is shocked because she doesn't see it that way, and awkwardly walks out of the HOH room. Joey is voted out in a unanimous 3-0 vote. I don't have a whole lot to say about Joy. She did seem like a nice presence that could have been fun, but she was just very awkward and a fish out of water, and it was clear that she knew very little about Big Brother, which didn't help her case. She definitely was not good at the game and should have done a lot more studying of the game before she entered it, but in general, she's not a first boots that I really remember a whole lot about when you look at the bigger picture, and while she's probably one of the more likable people of the season, losing her this early isn't really much of a loss. Week 2 is easily the best week of the season since there's actually some drama, some hilarious moments, and some sort of intrigue, which is very rare for Big Brother 16. Amber and Devin win the 2 HOHs since Cody was disqualified for the male section, and a lot of people are worried about Devin with power. Caleb is one of the few people who are happy with Devin winning, though Devin is having some emotions about judging Donnie, so he comes clean about everything, and Zach is overhearing all of this, and unleashes it to the house about forcing Caleb to nominate Donnie. Why does he feel the need to do this? And I think this happened before the first eviction. It might have, it might not have, I don't remember exactly. But anyways, this all just makes the house distrust him even more, as there was some talk about his emotions being a result of steroid withdrawal on line at the time, and I think there's a later scene where he kind of alludes to it. Brittany immediately mentions that it confirmed that the reason of people dropping first was BS, and Derek knows that he can't work with Devin long term. Caleb mentions that people are seeing it as Devin throwing Caleb and Frankie under the bus, which Frankie reiterates that Brittany was the one mentioning it. Devin claims that Brittany is paranoid and feels like she twisted his words. She didn't, so he wants her to go. We see the start of Nicole and Hayden's flirtmans, and she is willing to work with him in the future. Nicole approaches Christine about recruiting Hayden into the alliance, and Christine is apprehensive about it, though he ends up agreeing with their secret alliance. We see more of Caleb and Devin's bromance, and the HOHs talk about their nomination, where Devin wants to nominate Paola and Brittany, and Amber has to put up a girl and a guy, though she doesn't want to nominate Donnie. Derek mentions that they cannot put up an alliance member, and throws Nicole under the bus. Devin starts losing it over the dirty kitchen and Brittany leaving her lotion in the kitchen, and she's annoyed with his reaction. Amber nominates Hayden and Nicole for eviction, and Devin nominates Brittany and Paula for eviction. Devin tries to coach Nicole about what to say to Amber, and after he leaves, Nicole rants about targeting Devin. Brittany knows that Devin got Amber to nominate Nicole and Hayden to assure that herself and Paula don't win Battle of the Block, and he's going to get Paula to throw the Battle of the Block competition. We have the start of Zanky on the show, and he mentions that he isn't gay, but Frankie is like a boyfriend to him, and they cuddle a lot. Zach has since come out as bisexual and revealed that he and Frankie did have something after the show. Frankie was also one of the first people to steer Polly in his bisexuality as well, so I found that interesting. Anyways, Devin speaks to Paola about throwing the Battle of the Block, and she agrees to it. Paola throws the competition, causing Nicole and Hayden to win Battle of the Block and to be dethroned. Cody also makes more comments about his crush on Brittany. Remember this for later. Brittany is worried about going home this week. Hayden makes fun of Devin and mentions that Paola will never win anything, and he tells Nicole to deny anything if the plan about Paola throwing it to them ever comes up. The bomb squad meets up to discuss who they want to go home, and they all mention that the only person that wants Brittany gone over Paola is Devin, and Zach is very vocal about it, where everyone else is pretty silent, and almost mentioning that they are backdooring Devin. Caleb and Amber are speaking, and Devin realizes that Amber is dangerous to the group because she is toying with his emotions, though Devin was the one who brought her in the alliance in the first place. Christine, Amber, Derek, and Caleb are talking about how Devin cuts Amber off in conversations and how he's very demeaning to people, and talks about his vendetta against Brittany. Caleb tells Devin that most of the alliance wants Paola gone over Brittany, and Devin cannot comprehend this at all, and he blames it on Amber, which isn't the case at all. And Caleb tells Devin that he's telling him what people are saying, and he mentions that Devin blows things out of proportion, as well as the girls being afraid to speak to him. Devin storms off in the HOH room and rants about Caleb being a lovesick puppy, then storms downstairs to rant about the alliance being done now. Donnie, Frankie, and Derek are now a part of Team America. Caleb and Devin make up, though he's still offended about Caleb stating that he talks to women some type of way and still doesn't see the logic about booting Paola. Caleb says too much and mentions that the Alliance members are talking about throwing him up, which makes Devin suspicious. The Alliance goes in the HOH room. Devin mentions that Paola threw the competition, and Amber and Christine doesn't say anything to Devin, where Zach is the only one that admits that he wants Paola gone. Zach says too much in an attempt to clear the air, and when he does this, he mentions something about nominating Devin, which is just sketching Devin out more and more. Right before the veto competition, Devin tells Paola that he will pull her off the block, which Zach overhears. Devin ends up winning the veto, and Zach immediately kisses up to Devin, who tells him to choose whether he would boot Brittany or Paola. Zach tells Frankie that he is worried, and Frankie is shocked that Zach is shocked that he's in this predicament, since Devin is crazy and Zach disagreed with Devin vocally and publicly. Brittany goes to speak to Devin, and they end up making up as they are both working towards winning for the kids, so they have more emotions due to being parents. He asks her if she would be loyal if he vetoed her, and she of course says that she would be loyal. Zach and Devin have another conversation, and he mentions that Devin could put him up, which gives Devin a great idea, and Devin wasn't even thinking about it. Devin decides to veto Brittany, and he puts up Zach as a replacement nominee. Brittany calls out Paola for throwing the competition, and Zach as well as Paola unleash their wrath on Devin, as Paola confirms that he asked her to throw the competition, and she didn't throw the battle of the block, though Devin outright calls her out for lying. Paola calls Devin out for being a liar, and then he mentions that he had to change her heart with Brittany, and Zach then unleashes on Devin about how he uses his daughter almost as a weapon, and all of that jazz. I've been having issues watching this episode due to tech issues, so I'm kind of just winging it at this point. From what I remember, Caleb and Frankie actually were pushing for Zach to get booted, and they had some loyalty towards Devin at this point, but the others wanted to keep Zach, and they, meaning Derek, won the battle. Zach and Paola end up arguing about how much the other one sucks, and I found this to be pretty entertaining. Devin doesn't handle it well that the votes flipped, and denounces being a part of the Bomb Squad Alliance. Paola is evicted in a 10-2 vote. So Paola was essentially nominated the entire time that she was in the house, and you would think she would be someone that would be carried to the end, but she never really got in an alliance with anyone, and the few people that she was friends with, like Jocasta and Donnie, were on the outs. Strategically, she was definitely all over the place. She was very poor in competitions, and that was one of the main reasons why she was booted. She might have been entertaining had she lasted longer, though she could have easily been just as cringe had she lasted longer. So Paola being gone here really isn't much of a loss, and I don't think she knew anything about the game, and I don't think she cared much for it, so not a loss. Week 3 is an utter bore, and the game was already wrapped up in a bow by this point in the season, and it says a lot since this is the 13-week season. And we're in week 3, meaning that things are predictable for the next 10 to 11 weeks. Anyways, Nicole and Derek win the 2 HOHs of the week, and Nicole didn't want to win it. Devin knows that his time is coming to an end, and he told Brittany and Jocasta about the bomb squad in addition to who is in it, hoping that it will make his former allies a target, where he did the same thing with Donnie. This is just very stupid in so many ways. Unfortunately for him, it makes more people sketched up by him, and Devin tells Derek that he should nominate him, but Derek isn't going to give Devin two opportunities to take himself off the block. Derek tells Caleb that Devin is going home and told him about the conversation that Devin approached him with. Christine tells Nicole about the Bomb Squad Alliance and how she is now focused on working with Hayden and Nicole exclusively. Derek and Nicole are using this opportunity to talk game for the first time, and Derek mentions that he wants to boot Devin. Nicole mentions that she does want to work with Derek, but Cody, Christine, Hayden, and Donnie are not being nominated. He tells them that Amber and Caleb will be nominated since Amber nominated Nicole, and he can get Caleb to throw the battle off the block as an act to save Amber, so he can remain HOH. Jocasta is also discussed to be another nominee. We have more Hayden and Nicole stuff, and of course Derek predicts how Caleb will react when he relayed his idea to him, and this is a common thing all season with Derek and Caleb. Caleb tells Amber that Devin is getting backdoored and that the both of them are going to be nominated, and he's going to throw it to win her over. Nicole speaks to Donnie in hopes that they can start working together in the future, and he mentions that she should nominate Christine, which is stupid since he obviously knew how close they were at this point in time. Amber overhears Donnie talking about the situation with Jocasta and Brittany, and Amber goes to speak to Nicole about Donnie supposedly working with Brittany and Jocasta. Nicole nominates Amber and Donnie for eviction, and Derek nominates Caleb and Jocasta for eviction. Devin knows that he's getting backdoored, and he speaks to Derek about knowing what is going to happen, hoping that Derek might leave him alone for the week. Frankie is talking about his family and is actively avoiding talking about his sister, which is hard. So Team America gets a task about how a house guest is related to a former house guest, and at least two others believing that Zach is related to Amanda. And I actually do believe Amanda actually gave Zach a real estate job some years after the season and started his real estate career. Donnie and Amber end up winning Battle of the Block and dethroning Nicole. Jocasta is extremely sick, and Caleb tells Amber he threw the competition, though she tells him that she told him to not throw it. He mentions that he wants her for a date on finale, and she says no, and he definitely is trying to gaslight and pressure her into being with him, mentioning that he will be mad if she isn't his date to the finale. Cody is massaging Amber's back, and they talk about their friendship, and Cody whispers that Caleb is going to give him death threats for talking to her, and they talk about how she doesn't like Caleb like that. Caleb walks past them annoyed, and Amber whispers that she wished that she came in here weighing 350 pounds, and this is a really sad statement, since she's claiming that if she were bigger, people would leave her alone. Caleb speaks to Cody if he has anything with Amber, and Cody is clearly annoyed with this entire situation. Derek speaks to Caleb and Cody about how they need to get Caleb off the block, and as soon as he leaves, Cody mentions that he wants Caleb gone because he thinks Caleb will target him, so if Devin somehow remains safe, Caleb is a goner. Jocasta can't play in the veto competition, so Donnie is playing for her. Devin speaks to Donnie about whether he is close with Devin or not, and he's wondering if Donnie would use the veto. Actually, he's wondering if Donnie won't use the veto, so it would save Devin, and Donnie gives him nothing, since Derek never gives him anything in their conversations. Donnie ends up winning the veto, and everyone cheered when Devin lost the veto, so he knows that he is screwed. Donnie immediately tells Jocasta that he's going to use the veto on her, and she cries in his arms. Cody, for some reason, decides to do a striptease, and Devin isolates himself from the others to cry to himself. Donnie takes Jocasta off the block, and Devin is named the replacement nominee. Jocasta continues crying about being taken off the block, and they didn't really show Devin isolating himself over the last week and a half and giving up, but the producers told him that he needed to campaign for footage. Amber is sleeping, and Caleb gives her 2 covers, hoping that he will win a date with her, and Hayden is confused about it. Cody and Donnie are talking about Caleb being a liability and doesn't understand why he's playing for Amber, and Cody wants to take a shot at Caleb, but is shocked at how bad Caleb is in competitions. Cody and Donnie always had a good relationship in the season, which will definitely be important for later. Amber is talking with Cody, who is somewhat tickling Amber's leg, and they're flirting with one another, but Cody is annoyed that Caleb is cock-blocking, essentially. Cody complains to Derek and says that Caleb is acting like a little bitch, and he would fuck him up outside. And I noticed, rewatching the season, that you definitely see the poly side of Cody more often than not. And Zach comes outside to tell him that Caleb hates him because he likes Amber, and they're all over the Caleb/Amber situation. Hayden and Nicole starts to flirt even more, and the situation with Caleb and Amber is one of the reasons why they aren't in the new alliance that ends up being formed. Devin is talking to Cody about his parental situation and how he went to rehab, and he was struggling with steroids, I believe, and Cody is mentioning that he liked Devin at first, but he got caught up and is being reminded why he liked Devin in the first place. Cody speaks to Zach about how Devin is a good person, and they're trying to add some suspense to make it seem like Devin going home wasn't a slam dunk, and they show Zach and Frankie talk about it, and Frankie speaks to Christine and Derek about it. Overall, Devin is evicted in a unanimous 11-0 vote. Devin is definitely one of the more entertaining people of the season, but you could tell he was always going to be one that blew bright and dimmed even quicker. And he wouldn't be someone that would be entertaining if he lasted a decent amount of time in the season and would become even more grating. I don't think he was very likable at times, but he definitely adds a much needed craziness to the season. As a player, he definitely had some decent reads, but his execution and refusal to listen to anything anyone else said or to hear another perspective, and just his scatterbrainness as well as how rash he was definitely contributed to his downfall. Week 4 is yet another boring week in BB16, and there's some weird undertones in this week that I kind of don't like either. So Donnie overhears Cody and Frankie on how to win the competition, and Cody and Frankie win the HOH spots, though Zach and Amber were extremely close, and Cody mentions that he doesn't have a set target. Derek considers the Bomb Squad alliance to be dead and talks about how Brittany and Jocasta were close to winning it. Zach mentions to Frankie that he wants Jocasta and Victoria on the block. Brittany speaks to Donnie that she knows that she's being nominated and thinks the Bomb Squad exists in some shape or form, which she is correct on, and Donnie also feels like he'll be nominated. Frankie gets a letter from his sister, though he has to disguise who she is. Zach decides that since there are 5 people in the HOH room in Frankie, Christine, Zach, Derek, and Cody, they can form the detonators, since 8 people was too much to begin with, and they don't want to do with Caleb and Amber's drama. Though this might have been done during Derek's HOH reign, but they showed it a week later, I don't remember for sure. Cody and Frankie are talking about how much they are crushing on Zac Efron, and Hayden is a part of the conversation too, and talks about crushing on Leonardo DiCaprio. Team America is told to nominate a physical threat on the block, and Frankie accomplishes this with planning to nominating Amber, since she's the most physical girl in the house, and I believe he did this so he could get away with not nominating his allies, who are obviously stronger than her. Brittany makes her case to Frankie and mentions that she doesn't throw herself at Cody because she is older and the younger women in the house throw themselves at Cody. Frankie, of course, tells Cody all of this, and Cody is offended that she thinks so lowly of him, and I don't think that's how she meant it. Brittany and Cody are having a conversation in the middle of the night, and she is tired of the fakeness and lies in the house and also mentions her age. He mentions that she said something about how he would make his nominations about girls throwing themselves on him, and she said it was a throwaway comment. I think he had a crush on her and she wasn't interesting, which he took offense to. Amber and Cody are talking about starting over post-Devon, and Cody feels uncomfortable about the situation, and Amber mentions Cody is her closest male friend in the house. Caleb mentions that she is going to play him since she closed the door to speak to Cody, so he is fine with her going up. No one wants to sleep in the same bed with Victoria, and there's a small tiff between Brittany and Victoria about it. Brittany tries to clear the air with Victoria, and she's shocked that no one wants to sleep in the same bed with her. And honestly, this just shows how poor of a social game Victoria was playing at this point. Frankie tells Amber that she's going on the block, and of course she doesn't want to be on the block, but he's hoping to get as little blood on his hands. She keeps on mentioning that the girls are being nominated all the time, which is clearly a bad sign, and I'm glad that she picked up on this. Cody nominates Donnie and Brittany for eviction, and Frankie nominates Amber and Jocasta for eviction. Amber complains about the girls being nominated and not the guys, suggesting that she needs to talk to Christine and Nicole about the women looking out together. This is very ironic, since she sought Joy out about doing the same thing a few weeks ago, and Nicole and Christine are clearly the wrong girls to approach this to, because they're both very jealous women. Anyways, Brittany is annoyed that Cody compared her to Victoria, since Victoria is into playing the game. Jocasta and Amber end up winning the Battle of the Block competition, and Frankie is dethroned. Brittany is sulking and is ranting to Zach about Cody breaking her trust and being nominated because she didn't shove her boobs in his face, and complains about being on the block. We get some more cringe content of Zach's DRs, which are very overrated, and I don't know why people praise his diary rooms. And Victoria is whining about being on the block, where Hayden, simply put, doesn't care. We have to deal with more of this Cody, Amber, and Caleb mess, where Cody is warming Amber's hand because they are cold, and of course Caleb enters to be pissed off. Caleb, of course, complained about this to Zach, and the latter mentions that Cody is like this with every girl. And of course, Zach tells all of this to Cody, and he rants just like his older brother is infamous for. Brittany has to hear Caleb whining about how Amber doesn't appreciate him and everything he's done for her, and also telling Brittany that she has his vote to stay. Cody is annoyed that Brittany picked Caleb to play in the veto competition, and Caleb speaks to Cody about how Brittany should stay over Victoria, which is rubbing Cody the wrong way. Victoria ends up winning the veto because Caleb chose to not take the veto, which pisses Cody off even more. Cody rants to his alliance about Caleb going up on the blog, and Frankie is trying to play mediator with the situation. Donnie speaks to Hayden and Zach about how he would like Caleb to be put on the blog, and he actually makes a pitch to his alliance to send Caleb home. Derek mentions that Donnie needs to be a pawn, since if Brittany and Amber stay together, there will be a problem. If I remember correctly, on the feed, I believe there's one night where Brittany and Amber stayed up really late, and they're talking about the game, and they're starting to piece things together. So I think this is why Derek was worried, if I remember correctly. Cody speaks to Donnie, and the latter tells him that he could play his own game. Cody mentions that if he doesn't put Caleb up, his brother will call him the biggest pussy ever, which is very ironic, knowing the mess and issues that Polly has shown to the public and his recent revelations. And it kind of has me wondering what household they grew up in or what neighborhood they grew up in for them to be so insecure with their masculinity and projecting it in very toxic ways. Anyways, Cody rants to the others about how they can vote Brittany out, but he wants Caleb up and keeps on mentioning Polly, nagging at him for being a pussy. Frankie tells Derek that he's putting Caleb up and that Donnie flipped him. Derek ends up speaking to Cody and mentions that Caleb won't put them up and will go home over Brittany, but Donnie won't go home over her. Cody really does not want to nominate Donnie since he likes him, and it's interesting that he's like this now, but he kind of loses this connection with Donnie, which would have been advantageous to him. Victoria takes herself off the blog, and Cody names Donnie as the replacement nominee. This is a prime example of how I think Cody would have been a lot more like his brother in this season, but Derek had to consistently calm him down and kind of lead him to Derek's right direction, which is why we didn't see what we would see with his brother 2 seasons later. Brittany and Donnie are not still to be nominated against one another, and Cody is breaking down in tears about nominating Donnie, which I think says a lot, and probably a sign that he knows that he probably should have done something differently in his gut. His alliance is calming him down and reassuring him, and Frankie tells him that it won't bite him in the butt, where Frankie also runs to Donnie to ensure that it will be a unanimous vote against Brittany, so Frankie's clearly trying to cover his bases. Derek speaks to Donnie to give him reassurance and is told that Cody told Donnie that he was safe, and Donnie speaks to Cody, who apologizes to him, and Donnie realizes that Derek as well as Frankie are in a dominant alliance and a bigger alliance, and Derek is puppeting Cody. Brittany campaigns to Caleb and mentions that Zach and Victoria haven't done anything in the game, and she deserves to be here over them. Caleb makes a pitch for Brittany to stay, and how awful it would feel to go home over Victoria, and most of the house, including him, will feel this. Caleb mentions that Donnie will nominate 2 people in the alliance, but it's clear that nothing is going to happen. Frankie loses his grandfather and is told by the BB producers. He gets emotional since his grandfather was the first person he came out to, and the other house guests console him. Brittany is evicted in a unanimous 10-0 vote. Honestly, I had a higher opinion on Brittany as a player and a personality before rewatching the season. While she did have some good instincts and she never really had momentum in this season, she was a lot more whiny and entitled than I remembered, and her social game was definitely all over the place, where she rubbed some people the wrong way, so they didn't give her a chance, and she was very mouthy, but at the wrong time too, but it wasn't in an entertaining way either. She kept on mentioning how she deserved to be here over a bunch of other people, though there was really nothing that warranted it. But I do think she was definitely handicapped by the bro-centric and borderline misogynistic atmosphere in the season and cast. Week 5 is arguably one of the worst weeks I've seen in Big Brother history. The blatant misogyny, the gaslighting, the toxic atmosphere, but nothing really interesting happening. The contrived drama from Zach was just painful and excruciating to watch. And I remember at the time I almost quit the season because it was just so bad. Frankie and Zach are the two HOHs, and Zach wants to target Amber because Christine told the Alliance about everything Amber told her, and mentions Amber wanting to target Zach. Why would Christine tell them this? Did she really think she had much agency at all in that alliance? She was going to need people to take shots at her allies eventually so she could have more agency in the game. But she let her jealousy of all of the other women cloud her judgment into the season, and we see Christine's eventual fate. But at the same time, I do think it's kind of karmic for Amber, who was literally Christine against Joey a few weeks ago. Donnie and Jocasta are expecting to be nominating alongside Victoria since it's been done in the past already. Frankie and Zach both agree for Amber to go, but it's best for Zach to do it since no one will question it. Zach tells Caleb that he is questioning her since people told him about what Amber stated and Caleb doesn't like it. But he mentions that she's getting too big for her britches and Caleb is the one keeping her safe, which not true at all and too yikes. Caleb speaks to Amber about how Zach was told that she was targeting him, and she knows someone from the Alliance told him that, so she doesn't even really deny it. Frankie is emotional over seeing pictures of his grandfather, which was why Derek threw the competition to him, and Christine speaks to Zach and Frankie, where she's told that she has to throw the Battle of the Block if she is nominated, which Christine is not down for whatsoever. We have a segment of Caleb eating a pickle because Amber said that she would date him, and he does it, where she thought that they were just joking. The date ends up happening and it's awkward as hell, and it clearly took place at the end of last week instead of the beginning of this week, but it didn't fit into the narrative of what was happening in the last week. The HOHs and Cody talk about backdooring Amber instead of nominating her since she will out the bomb squad, though it's already known, and Cody doesn't get why Zach wants to nominate Christine, where they just started the detonators a week ago and two of them are in power. Zach is already getting HOH-itis and getting on people's nerves. Zach throws Christine under the bus to Nicole without telling her any information, but Nicole speaks to Christine about if there's something that she doesn't know, and Christine just mentions that the bomb squad is already known by everyone. Derek and Cody talk about their final two and how much Zach's game sucks, essentially, where they name themselves the Hitmen. Team America has a task that would cause them to create an argument to fight for 20 seconds, and it's a flop since the house is a flop. Zach is propped up to make an obnoxious, antagonistic speech. Amber tries to do damage control with Zach when he's trying to sleep, and it's clearly going nowhere, and trying to wake someone up when they're sleeping to talk game with them and to make their case, it never really works out anyways. Zach nominates Christine and Nicole for eviction while giving his obnoxious as hell speech, and Frankie nominates Jocasta and Victoria for eviction. Christine is of course pissed off and Nicole is crying, where Jocasta has to calm Victoria down so they can win Battle of the Block. Jocasta has a completely different personality in the diary room than she does in the house with the others, and it's alarming and grating. Nicole and Christine end up winning Battle of the Block, and Zach is dethroned, which the entire house is thrilled about, which says a lot about his positioning in the house and how the house feels about him. Victoria blames Jocasta for losing Battle of the Block, though Jocasta was the one giving her the right advice, and Victoria chose not to listen. Zach decides to aggravate Christine and Nicole by eating in front of them while they are half-nots. I'm over Zach's attempts to pander for TV time, and it's making the season even more painful to watch. Frankie and Cody bash Zach for being the new Devin. People want to put him on the block, and he nominated his own alliance the first opportunity possible. We conveniently have content of Hayden and Victoria talking game, and he mentions that he would take her off the block if he wins the veto. And I forgot that Hayden had a weird, obsessive hatred for Amber and threatened violence against her several times. Of course, all behind her back, and Nicole is jealous of Hayden and Victoria speaking, which was a really bad sign. Derek is given news about his grandfather passing away. If I remember correctly, this happened like 3 days after Frankie's grandfather passing away, and I really feel for the both of them, since they can't even attend the funerals of their grandfathers. Caleb realizes that he wasted his time with Amber because of his quote-unquote good guy antics aren't being rewarded. And it's disgusting to see the cast use this to their advantage. Frankie and Zach are cuddling and flirting in the HOH room, and Zach is insistent on being straight, though Frankie doesn't really buy it. From what we know now about them hooking up shortly after the season, it's interesting watching all of this and seeing someone come to terms with their sexuality on camera, though it wasn't really by their own choice or volition, but they weren't forced to either. Amber is clearly in the dark as she's mentioning that she hopes the nominations stay the same, since she doesn't want Donnie up. Anyways, Amber is hosting the competition that is sealing her fate as it's a true backdoor. Hayden wins the veto and the detonators speak to Hayden about using the veto. Frankie mentions that he's going to have a conversation with Caleb to make sure that this happens smoothly. Amber tells them that she has mentioned that she isn't interested several times and he's blowing things out of proportion. Of course, Zach tells Caleb all of this, who speaks to Frankie about putting Amber up to think that she's getting backdoored, but they will scare her and keep her. But she's getting too close to the other side. I can't even describe how repulsive this is on so many levels. Caleb thinks he's running the house, and Frankie is getting everything he wants. The misogyny is especially disgusting this week, and I remember wanting to quit the show at the time, and it's only gotten worse 9 years later, rewatching this now. Hayden vetoes Victoria off the block, and Frankie names Amber the replacement nominee. Zach decides to interrupt and antagonize Amber with his speech, and she rightfully gives him absolutely nothing. So his lame, contrived desperation for TV time fell flat. Amber immediately knows that they all planned this, and a bunch of people immediately tell Jocasta that she is safe. Amber speaks to Frankie, and he claims that Caleb is the reason why she went up, but she mentions that Frankie is the one who nominated her. Amber mentions to Caleb that she gets that he is the reason why she's on the block, and she hasn't done anything to cause distrust. He is about to read a Bible verse, and he mentions that she's hanging out with the woman too much. They have a conversation again, and Caleb mentions that the entire house, or the entire alliance, knew about it. Caleb is having some regret about it, and Frankie allows him to take the blame. For some reason, many people in the alliance are having a conversation with Amber again about whether she likes Caleb, and she ends up walking off crying. Amber rants to Christine and wants Caleb gone, but Christine seemingly wants to keep Amber around as she will target Caleb. If she didn't want Amber to go home for her game, why the hell did she rat her out to begin with? Just really catastrophically bad gameplay on Christine's part. And apparently, Cody didn't want her to go either, since for his game, keeping her around is actually a good thing. But I think Derek realized that it would benefit Cody and not him, so good for Derek, at least. Anyways, Frankie uses this to tell Caleb that Amber wants him out, and this changes Caleb's mind to boot her. The entire situation is gross, and it's almost just as bad as Big Brother 15 in my opinion, despite the season heavily trying to be quote-unquote clean and quote-unquote safe after the utter disaster of last season. I forgot that there's a task to not make this vote a unanimous vote, but the cast is way too boring, so it never is going to happen, since it isn't in Donnie's character to set someone up. And honestly, I have to mention in this rewatch that Donnie doesn't age very well. And it's very clear that he's extremely boring as a player and as a person, which I was kind of blinded by that fact, or I didn't focus on it much 9 years ago. Anyways, Amber is evicted in a unanimous 9-0 vote. So Amber, within the last year, got diagnosed with autism, and it makes a lot of sense as to why she struggled socially in not only in this game, but the challenge as well, despite her being a well-intentioned, nice person, and her neurodivergency causes people to mistrust her and to think the worst of her. I do think Amber was slowly starting to learn the game, though while the Caleb situation is gross, I don't really think it ruined her game, since this was a very male-centric house, and she was kind of included into the Bomb Squad Alliance by happenstance and randomness, so she wasn't going to last too much longer anyways, especially since she was the strongest woman player competitively. She had the right idea to target the guys eventually and to get the girls together, but she was a bit too late, and with the way she played in the beginning, it kind of put her in the position that she was in now. But despite that, I don't think she was very interesting herself, and she didn't really have much going on as a character or a personality outside of the unfortunate circumstance that she was put in. So week 6 is most likely the second best week of the season, but it doesn't mean that it's a good week at all. There's just a bit of suspense in the week, which most of the weeks in this season didn't have, so that's why I'm putting it here. Donnie and Nicole win the HOH slots for the week, and you think something interesting would finally happen, and that there's some hope in the season. Zach is acting like he's pissed that he lost, though he threw it, and is bragging about being an actor, and of course the Detonators and Caleb are worried, since this is the very first time in the season that they're completely powerless. Jocasta really loses it over screwing up the HOH, since she wants to win HOH. And Derek tells her that she is safe because of Donnie, and it's unfortunate for her how this week ends up. Donnie and Nicole are struggling to game talk, and he mentions that Cody, Derek, and Frankie have never been nominated. Nicole mentions that all the girls are leaving, though this is a routine in her Big Brother career, and Zach tells her to put him up as some sort of reverse psychology, and she is very cagey with him about who her target is. Derek and Frankie are hoping that Donnie keeps them safe since they gave up $10,000 of a prize because Donnie didn't want to do it last week for Team America. Nicole tells Derek that Frankie is her main target and she wants to backdoor him, though Derek is pretending to agree with it and doesn't want to tell Frankie since it will backfire on him. Caleb is worried about Donnie being HOH since he nominated him the first week, and Caleb lies to Donnie about not being the target on the first week. Caleb mentions that he doesn't want to be nominated with Victoria, which gives Donnie the idea to do just that. Donnie gives Frankie and Derek their word on being safe, and Derek suggests for Donnie to nominate Victoria and Jocasta, and the last one is ridiculously unrealistic, and Frankie makes the smarter move to leave him alone. Hayden games with Nicole and Donnie about how they should backdoor Frankie, but Caleb is a good substitute target. Zach is speaking to Nicole again, my bad, to get her to not nominate him, but it doesn't work. Nicole nominates Zach and Jocasta for eviction, and Donnie nominates Caleb and Victoria for eviction. Zach feels confident that he will win Battle of the Block, but even if they lose, he's sure he has the votes to stay over Jocasta. We have both sets of nominees plotting on how they're going to communicate through the competition, but Caleb and Victoria win Battle of the Block, causing Donnie to be dethroned. Frankie speaks to Nicole about her goal for the week, and she lies stating that she wants Zach gone, but he doesn't realize that she wants to backdoor him. We learn of an alliance that was made with Nicole, Hayden, Derek, and Cody, and she tells them about the plan to backdoor Frankie, so the hitmen are trying to play both sides right now. Christine realizes that she and Nicole are drifting, and she actually wants Zach to go home this week, but she warns her about Zach staying if he's on the block against Jocasta. Christine is also planting seeds to cause a drift with Nicole and Hayden by mentioning that he kissed Victoria, and he wants Zach to stay. Nicole asks Hayden about this, and he denies it, because it isn't true, which causes them to start turning against Christine. Nicole tells all this to Cody and mentions that Christine said to put up Cody and Derek, and it's interesting seeing the catty women turn against one another. Of course, Cody tells all this to Derek, and they mention that Frankie needs to go home. Zach mentions that he has the votes, though Christine wants to vote Zach out, and is obviously not knowing that Derek and Cody are working with Nicole and Hayden. We have the start of the BB comics with this season, and Zach has a meltdown because he blew the veto. Christine won the veto, and she's not aware of the plan to backdoor Frankie, so she has no incentive on using it. We get more Hayden and Nicole bashing Christine before we see Christine not use the veto, and I don't remember if Christine was ever told about the backdoor Frankie plan, or if Nicole spoke to Christine about what she would do with the veto. Derek and Cody mention to Hayden that Zach is going home at this point, and there's nothing to worry about. Frankie walks up and sees that Cody and Derek stopped talking when he appeared, since Frankie remembered Zach telling him a while ago that the latter have a final 3 with Derek and Cody. Frank speaks to Derek, and the latter realizes there is a lot of damage control that needs to be done, as Frankie brings up the supposed final 3. Derek makes it out like Zach is a liar, and says that they should get rid of him this week, since Zach is a liar. With Frankie on board, Derek speaks to Caleb about ruling out Zach, though Caleb mentions that Zach is a number, despite being relatively untrustworthy. Derek's mind has changed after the conversation, and he speaks to Cody about exposing Hayden and Nicole, and sticking with the numbers to beat Jocasta and target Hayden and Nicole. I don't know if this was very accurate, or if it was due to the diary room pushing this. I don't remember. Cody and Derek end up revealing the secret alliance with Hayden and Nicole to Christine, and that they wanted her and Frankie out next, and Frankie is told all this information. Jocasta is evicted in a 6-2 vote. When it comes to the game, Jocasta didn't really have a game. She was close to Donnie and I think Paula in the beginning, but she didn't really have any solid alliance. She was consistently nominated up until the point that she left, and she was never in a power position whatsoever, and was poor in competitions. As a personality, she turned it up in the diary room in her last few weeks, which is very annoying, especially since she never acted like that in the house, so it's just very off-putting. A good person, but didn't add much of anything to the season. It is a double eviction, and jury just started, so the exact same formula as Big Brother 15 and Big Brother 17 will follow this as well. Of course, Nicole is questioning what happened with the votes, and Derek comes up with some sort of lie about Victoria pulling him into a room, which is just ridiculous. Caleb wins HOH and nominates Donnie and Hayden for eviction. Donnie ends up winning the veto, and of course takes himself off the block, so Nicole is named the replacement nominee. For some reason, Hayden and Nicole start blaming Frankie and Christine for them voting out Zach, and it's just weird. Hayden is evicted in a 5-2 vote. So I mentioned that I didn't like his aggression towards Amber on the feeds, and on the episodes, he wasn't given much camera time whatsoever, so he was kind of forgettable in that instant. But he came off like a surfer dude that didn't surf, but he was a lot more calm. But I do think he had a lot of potential in the game to do damage. Since he had a lot of the correct reads, he waited his time and he made a lot of bonds with people. But I think it was kind of just happenstance that he wasn't included in the Bomb Squad Alliance. At the same time, I can't really say that I was entertained by him. But the edit almost fooled me into liking him, but I kind of just don't. It sucked that he had to watch Nicole hook up with Corey like weeks after he and she broke up on Big Brother 18, but in general, I just don't have much of anything for Hayden. There was some drama in week 7 to make it better than some of the other painfully boring weeks, but I just didn't give an F about anyone in this cast or the game at all by this point. Nicole lashes out at Christine and Frankie, and Zach kind of encourages the drama to continue festering. Christine mentions that Nicole played her, and she heard things within the last few hours. Apparently, there was some sort of alliance with Frankie, Christine, Hayden, and Nicole, and they flashed back it, but they didn't put it in the episode until now. And Frankie is doing the same grade A gaslighting as well as Zach, mentioning that he voted out Hayden, and Nicole mentions that Christine and Frankie wanted Zach out yesterday. It's amazing that Christine and Frankie are getting blamed, though Cody as well as Derek are getting off scot-free, when the latter two are the ones actually responsible for this. Zach kind of realizes that Nicole isn't really lying about Frankie, which Frankie doesn't like, clearly. Nicole and Christine are the HOHs of the week, and Frankie tells Christine that they are in trouble with many of the guys. Christine and Nicole seemingly make peace and talk about who they will nominate. Frankie enters the room to try to make his case and says that he and Christine will flip to work with Nicole, Donnie, and maybe Victoria, which Christine does not like, and it's a move of desperation on Frankie's part, and you think he should have waited a bit more and not be as hectic. Zach decides to brown nose Nicole, and he throws Frankie and Christine under the bus for playing the entire house, where Nicole also tells Zach about her alliance with Cody and Derek that broke up today. Zach tells Caleb, Derek, and Cody that Frankie threw them under the bus, and they mention that they have to volunteer to be nominated against Frankie to send him home. Derek tells Nicole of the plan to throw a battle of the block to keep Frankie on the block and to send him home. Caleb enters the room and volunteers to be on the block as a pawn against Frankie, where he now knows that Frankie sent Amber home based on a lie. I'm guessing someone came clean last week. Christine nominates Donnie and Zach for eviction, and Nicole nominates Frankie and Caleb for eviction. Zach lashes out at Christine and Frankie during the nomination ceremony, and from what was shown on the feed, and what many of the house guests have confirmed afterwards, once it was known that Caleb would throw battle off the block, they changed the competition and rebuilt it to make it an easier comp for Frankie to do on his own. And it's essentially the same competition that Frankie won HOH after the double in Big Brother 14. They did the competition a lot later than usual since they were rebuilding it, and we see Caleb refuse to do the competition with Frankie. Caleb calls out Frankie for lying on Amber and throwing everyone under the bus to Nicole, which Zach yells in agreement about. Caleb was not allowed to rejoin by the producers, and Frankie ends up winning Battle of the Block for himself and Caleb, dethroning Nicole. Zach continues lashing out at Frankie because the latter apparently makes fun of him to everyone, and they all continue arguing once they enter the room. Zach is calling Frankie out for being a liar, and Frankie admits that it's Big Brother, so everyone is a liar, and Frankie is mentioning that he is the reason why Zach is still in the house. Caleb asks Frankie if what Christine and Nicole said about him throwing the four of them under the bus is true, and Frankie says that it is true. Derek tells them that they need to hash it out privately, so the people who aren't involved won't be able to hear, and Derek did a lot of this during the season, and it made it a lot more boring since there's barely any drama. Frankie reveals that he has a truth that he needs to come out with, and he tells them about his sister being Ariana Grande, and it isn't winning people over as much as he thinks it is. Zach lashes out in the diary room, stating that he's wasting his time being in the house and that Frankie is going to win, since Frankie is also playing for charity. We finally learn that Derek has been working on his relationship with Victoria for weeks now, and is using her for a vote essentially, and he has final twos with her and Cody, so no shocker that they end up being the final three. Zach ends up winning the veto to Christine's chagrin, and Nicole is hoping that Christine keeps her word on their promise to not backdoor one another, no matter who is dethroned as the HOH. Zach and Frankie seemingly make up, but Zach tells Victoria about the alliance, and that he's throwing Frankie under the bus completely. Victoria is hurt because she thought that it was just herself and Derek. Zach realizes that he fucked up, so he admits it to Derek, which pisses Derek off and tells Nicole and Victoria that none of this is true and that Zach blamed them for it. He gets a bunch of them in the room, and Zach mentions that he lied and causes for Zach and Victoria to go back and forth, and Derek is happy since everyone knows that Zach is a liar and he successfully gaslit Victoria. Nicole was told information by Zach about them working together, so Derek, Cody, and Caleb realize that they need to pressure Christine into putting up Nicole, and Caleb mentions that Nicole is saying stuff to Nicole and lies about Nicole saying that Christine would be backdoor this week if she remained HOH. Zach tells Christine that everyone assumes that she and Nicole are working together, and if she does not put her up, it'll make Christine look worse. Zach takes himself off the block, and Christine names Nicole as the replacement nominee. Christine chose her side and hopes that they keep her safe, so the alliance is reunited, and it's pathetic to see Christine completely roll over and lose any sort of agency, even though she knows the right thing to do. Nicole speaks to Christine and is hurt that she was backstabbed and wasn't even given a chance to explain herself, when Nicole mentions that she wouldn't have backdoored her. Nicole doesn't believe that Christine was pressured into doing this, though Christine was, and it shows off how off she was, and she doesn't think that the big alliance are working together. Donnie talks about being left out of the conversations, and Zach is starting to speak to him, as they have nots together, and they don't talk much. Nicole continues crying, and she mentions that Christine is acting very weirdly with Cody, and she is married. Nicole campaigns to Christine about how Donnie keeps sliding by, and Christine does trust Nicole over Donnie, who she has never trusted, and of course she campaigns to Cody, who agrees that Donnie is scheming and is targeting Cody and is sliding by. Christine and Cody want Donnie gone over Nicole, but Derek is more in favor of booting Nicole. We waste a bunch of time on Caleb, Frankie, and Christine leaving the house to go to some sponsored event. Nicole is evicted in a unanimous 6-0 vote. Even going back to Big Brother 16, I did not like Nicole. I didn't care for her country girl, small town attitude or shtick or personality or whatever it was. I thought she was very catty and vindictive even back then, and she's a lot of the reason why the season ended up being this way, since she actively sold out all the women because she was insecure about herself and felt inferior to the other women, and was way too passive until she started to play in the jury phase. Though while she definitely had some potential as a player, she was also way too passive and overestimated what was happening in the house and her abilities and her reads. She was a good competitor, though, as she won a few HOHs, even though many of them were dethroned. Week 8 is yet another boring week, and while it was kind of cool that Donnie won Battle of the Block by himself, it just led to the bottom person in the alliance going, so it wasn't even that exciting. And at this point, Donnie really wasn't contributing anything to the season. Derek and Frankie are the HOHs of the week, and it's clear that Donnie is the main target, since he's the only other person, other than non-threat Victoria, that is not in the alliance. Derek is mentioning in the diary room that he doesn't want Donnie to go, but he has since admitted that he lied in the diary room to avoid production effing things up for him. Derek, Caleb, and Cody mention that they have to get Zach to volunteer being on the block, and Cody doesn't want to be on the block. They talk about throwing the Battle of the Block, but it failed last week, and Derek mentions that Victoria isn't going on the block. Derek and Frankie talk about trusting one another due to the bond over their grandfathers, and Frankie mentions in the diary room that the only person he trusts 100% is Derek. Frankie mentions that Cody hasn't been nominated, and they both want Derek to remain as HOH. Frankie is happy that they actually included pictures of Ariana, and Derek tells Donnie without saying it that he is getting nominated. Team America has a task where they have to hide one another's clothes, and this will affect how the rest of the week plays out. The bomb squad meets in the HOH room. The detonators meet in the HOH room. Actually, no, it is the bomb squad because Caleb's a part of it. Whatever. They all meet in the HOH room and they talk about one of Victoria and Donnie having to be off the block and that people in their alliance have to go on the block at this point, since Battle of the Block still exists. Zach, Christine, and Cody doesn't want to be nominated, and Caleb is annoyed since he has volunteered to be on the block several times and mentioned that if it wasn't for them, Zach would have been home 2 weeks ago. Or a bit over a week ago. They end up putting Skittles in the bag and they pull them out, and whoever draws the wrong color will be nominated. So Christine is nominated against Donnie, and Cody as well as Caleb are going to be nominees. Zach is happy that he isn't on the block because his own alliance wanted him out 2 weeks ago, and Zach talks about loving this homosexual while they continue to flirt. People talk about Christine and Cody touching and flirting with one another, and it's getting its own montage, which is very uncomfortable to watch. It's even more awkward because there has been a lot of dissension in Christine's marriage beforehand, which she has since revealed, and seeing that she got booed over this when many others have outright cheated, it's just ridiculous, and they didn't even get this reaction. Caleb rants about how much he dislikes Zach and is fine with him going home before Christine and Victoria, and the hitmen agree with him about if Donnie wins the veto, they send Zach home, since they don't need him anymore. Donnie is told by Team America that he is a pawn to backdoor Victoria, and he picks up that Frankie and Derek are working together, since they consistently say we, and they know that Donnie isn't buying it. Frankie nominates Cody and Caleb for eviction, and Derek nominates Donnie and Christine for eviction. Christine throws the Battle of the Block competition, and she has since admitted that production apparently told Donnie during the competition that she was throwing it. Donnie single-handedly wins the final Battle of the Block for himself and Christine, with Derek being dethroned. Cody and the Alliance is not thrilled that this is the second week in a row where they planned to throw the Battle of the Block and it failed. Derek tells Donnie that Victoria is going to go home and is trying to ease suspicion of Christine throwing the competition. But Donnie knows that Derek is blowing smoke up his ass, and Derek can feel that Donnie doesn't trust him. Great intuition on both of their parts. Derek relays it to Frankie that he does not trust them, Donnie doesn't trust them, and they are both worried that the veto won't be used, and one of Caleb or Cody are guaranteed to go. If that's the case. Frankie feels like he has to send Victoria home, but Derek wants Zach gone. Donnie tells Zach that he hopes he wins the veto, since Zach could be backdoored, and Donnie knows that Zach is at the bottom of his alliance. Zach tells Donnie to win the veto, since he's one of the few who would keep the nominations the same if Victoria isn't backdoored. Frankie wins the veto, and he's thinking about backdooring Zach. The thievery that Team America was given caused a neighborhood watch and leads to a domino effect where they all consider Zach to be the thief. Derek and Frankie use this as a rationale to send Zach home. Frankie takes Caleb off the block and nominates Zach as the replacement nominee. Zach is crushed that Frankie nominated him, and he campaigns to Donnie, who says he will vote to keep him. Zach then campaigns to Caleb, who outright shuts him down about keeping him, since he thinks Zach would nominate him over Cody, without realizing that Cody was going to send Caleb home about a month ago. And Frankie mentions that Zach has pit everyone in the alliance against one another, and he mentions that Zach mentioning that he doesn't trust them, and if he agreed to throw the Battle of the Block early in the week, they wouldn't have been in this position, which is why he's going home now. Victoria decides to rip the pink hat that Zach took from her in the first week, and they waste a decent amount of time on this. Donnie and Christine talk, and he is trying to mention that Zach himself and Christine are alone, so he's trying to campaign for Zach. Zach campaigns to Frankie once again and mentions that Cody will go after Frankie, which is true, but Frank mentions that Zach is too unpredictable. Zach is evicted in a unanimous 5-0 vote. I didn't like Zach at the time, and I dislike him even more now, as I found his diary rooms to be very contrived. The people act like he was one of the most natural in the diary room, which wasn't the case, and he was so desperate for camera time, and it was clear that he had no idea what he was doing in the game. So he talked himself up like he was a good player, when I actually think he was a pretty bad player, and I didn't like how he treated a lot of the people in the season. At the same time, watching him come to terms with his sexuality on camera was kind of interesting to see, and him kind of deny his identity in that way. Though it was kind of uncomfortable too, because this is someone doing this without even realizing it. I know he has since admitted that his mental health was not very good during the season, and especially after the season, so I'm glad he got it together overall, though I did enjoy him here. By this point, there was clearly just no hope in the season, and week 9 was where things got really, really tedious, and I just wanted the season to end. So Nicole returns to the house, and no one but Donnie is excited to have her back, who tells her everything that happened in the last week. Derek mentions to the group that it will probably be Christine who speaks to them, and Victoria tells them about Nicole and Donnie talking. Cody is worried about Donnie, since he's trying to get the alliance to turn on one another, and Cody tells them about a supposed final 3 with Derek, Frankie, and Christine, which Derek admits in the diary room is true. Maybe Cody should have settled on it and picked up on it and used it to better herself in the game and split that up instead of just immediately burning whatever information he was given. Caleb essentially does the same thing Victoria does, and they are all determined to stick together. We're getting some filler about Caleb being a ninja, and it's clear that they're showing this because the house is extremely boring. Cody ends up winning HOH. Donnie was second in the competition, and everyone knows Donnie and Nicole will be nominated. Derek is setting it up for Christine to be the first from the alliance to get booted, since she isn't winning competitions, though I think at this point Derek and Christine won the same amount of competitions. Nicole makes her point about how she wouldn't go after him, and he rants about how much he wants Donnie, the schemer, out. Derek and Cody agree that they would rather want Nicole around than Christine, because the latter is plotting too much and is playing both sides of the alliance, where they just like Nicole more. We have a segment of Derek talking, looking, and dressing younger, so he could blend in with the other house guests. The other house guests are talking about Hayden and how awesome he is in the jury house, and it's interesting because she is now married to Victor, and I know she and Hayden broke up about a few weeks before Big Brother 18. So, yeah. Donnie wakes Cody up to give his pitch to Cody, who is clearly not giving a single fuck. One flaw that I will say about Cody is that Donnie had a huge liking and affinity for Cody, and he never used that towards his advantage the entire season. Derek and Donnie have a tense conversation about Team America, and they finally acknowledge that they are gunning for one another, since Cody told Derek everything, and he mentions that Donnie isn't social, which is true, and Donnie knows that Derek prayed with Jocasta before sending her out. Cody nominates Donnie and Nicole for eviction. Caleb is talking about how Donnie is a genius since his eyes keep on spattering, and Cody is mentioning that if Donnie wins the veto, should he backdoor Frankie, and Derek mentions that Donnie would send him home, where Frankie would protect him, so don't do that. It's another example of the poly wanting to come out of Cody, but Derek has to restrain him and it. There is a task, and Donnie is trying to guilt Derek and Frankie into keeping him because of Team America. Victoria is having issues with her wisdom teeth, and it's causing her head to swell. Long story short, there's a medical emergency where she kind of passes out in the washroom. It's the second time where we see non-contestants enter the house and make it on air. And the first was Big Brother 9, where 2 medical emergencies happened at once. Derek and Frankie talk about how they cannot accept the mission to save Donnie, and they talk to Donnie about how their task can be making a play instead. The cast created a system to rake the counting competition, so they make sure that Donnie doesn't win, and the fact that they can game the competition is why they don't do this anymore, the counting competition. Cody wins the veto, and it's clear that nothing is going to change, though he takes the nominees to a movie as a good gesture, I guess. So the house guests decide to play the 8 evicted house guests, and he later on rambled about how the BB fans not liking it because they are homophobic on feeds, which is just really stupid and tacky, Frankie. Derek talks to Cody about they need to split up Caleb and Frankie, and Cody wants to backdoor Frankie again, since they would have Derek, Victoria, and whomever of Donnie and Nicole comes off the block to vote him out. Cody decides to not use the veto. Derek is starting to butter Nicole up, so she won't target him if she wins HOH, and Nicole is getting close to Christine once again, which is worrying Frankie, since it means that if Nicole won't target Christine, she will target him. Derek and Frankie are talking, and the latter mentions that he wants Nicole gone, but if Donnie stays, he trusts them. Frankie tells Caleb that Christine and Nicole are getting way too comfortable for his liking, and they try to make it seem like Frankie, Caleb, and Derek are contemplating a flip, but it's all horseshit. Frankie mentions that Nicole is a much better social player, and Cody mentions that they took one shot at Nicole and got her out, where they tried and failed to get Donnie out 3 to 4 times. 5 hours before the eviction, Frankie and even Caleb were begging Cody to send home Donnie, but he doesn't buy it, which Cody ends up telling Nicole about. Donnie is evicted in a unanimous 5-0 vote. It's always interesting watching something live and then watching things way after the fact where the novelty isn't present. And I think with Donnie, the novelty wore off for me, so I just really saw him as a very boring but very nice player and a house guest. It sucks that he wasn't really able to blend in, but he also partially did it to himself, as he went to bed early every night and didn't really make a whole lot of effort into socializing and blending in with the house. He had some decent reads here and there, but if you're not socially involved in the dynamics, there's really nothing much you can do. Overall, I do appreciate that he was one of the few people who saw through Derek, but it didn't amount to anything at all. Week 10 is just as tepid and uninspired as most of the other weeks in the season. Caleb ends up winning HOH despite Nicole trying to help Christine, which Frankie notices, and Christine is expecting for Caleb to nominate Victoria and Nicole, and she will be disappointed soon. Derek mentions that Nicole and Christine were talking in the washroom, which he tells Frankie, who rants about how right he was. Derek mentions that he wants Christine gone this week, despite Nicole being enemy number 1. Frankie rants about Donnie being dead weight, and that America hates them for booting Donnie, but America is going to have to love them now. Frankie gets paranoid about Nicole not having her microphone on, and Christine is defending her, but she thinks that Frankie is getting too paranoid, and she doesn't want to isolate Nicole. Victoria bashes Christine for being the fakest person in the house. Victoria did this to a lot of the women in the house this season, and Derek is pretending to listen to her. Nicole pitches her case to Caleb, and he mentions that she won more competitions than he did, in addition to the fact that she would have worked with the woman, which was proven in the HOH competition. Nicole is made a have-not for the second week in a row by Caleb, and Frankie was only on it once the entire season, and she has a meltdown where Derek has to cheer her up, which is good jury management. Caleb is hesitating about putting Christine up, and Cody does not want her up, but they know that she is vengeful, and it's what Derek wants. Cody throws Frankie under the bus by telling Christine that it was Caleb who was campaigning for Donnie to stay to Christine, which annoys Caleb. Caleb nominates Nicole and Christine for eviction. Despite Caleb wanting Nicole to go, Derek wants Christine to go, but doesn't want to push it until after the veto. Nicole goes to Derek for comfort, and Caleb is telling Cody that Victoria will go home if Nicole wins the veto. But Derek tells them that Christine needs to go because she is strong mentally and physically, and it's mainly because Derek can't control Christine. Nicole and Victoria trash Christine and her closeness to Cody, but she's trying to get Victoria to veto her if she wins it. Derek works on his plan to steal Caleb from Frankie by buttering up Caleb's ego, downplaying his own game, and mentioning that Caleb will beat him at the end. Christine is really pissed off about being nominated, but she goes upstairs because she knows that there's a good chance of her going home, though she would rather hang out with the girls at this point. Caleb is still not over the Amber stuff, which happened a month ago by this point, and they are sketched out by Frankie wanting to play in the veto so badly, but Derek redirects the conversation to boot Christine. Cody literally says that he's fine with Christine going, despite him being cool with her. Christine ends up winning the veto, and Derek's plan to throw it to Nicole fails. Caleb is annoyed that Frankie kisses up to Christine right after winning the veto, and Derek is going to find another way to save Nicole. Cody speaks to Christine and hopefully can use this to get Frankie out this week. Derek, Christine, and Caleb talk about how they all want Frankie gone immediately, and the hitmen talk about backdooring Frankie since he would nominate them, which is a misread. Nicole and Derek are talking, and she mentions that he's the best game in the house, and he's the closest thing to Dan Giesling, which seals Nicole's fate. Derek speaks to Cody and Caleb about sending Nicole home, and Cody is hesitant, but Caleb, of course, is easily swayed. Christine takes herself off the block, and Caleb names Victoria the replacement nominee. Nicole continues to rant about the house not making moves, and Caleb tells Frankie that he considered putting him up, which was a collective of the lines. Frankie asks who specifically, and Caleb in a roundabout way says Cody, and he reassures Caleb on being his final two. Derek and Frankie talk about the latter almost being backdoored, and Derek said that it was Caleb who brought it up, and it wasn't a serious consideration. Frankie does not buy it, and mentions that Caleb told him about it, and is even more annoyed that Derek won't fess up to it. Derek, of course, reports everything to Cody, who is mad at Caleb for playing like an ass clown, and knows that Christine and Frankie are going after him, where they talk about taking the two of them out immediately. Nicole is evicted in a unanimous 4-0 vote. There's really not much to say about Nicole since her return. She was immediately put on the out, and there's definitely some isolation tools that were used against her that was kind of uncomfortable to watch. But of course, she just ranted about how big moves needed to be made and how no one wanted to really give her a chance. Though she definitely had avenues to stay longer. On to the next. Derek wins HOH and nominates Christine and Victoria for eviction. Frankie wins the veto and doesn't use it, though it would have been in his best interest to save Christine. Christine is evicted in a unanimous 3-0 vote, where the house guests were talking about Christine being booed. Okay, so I'm going to outright admit it. I definitely did not like Christine in the season, and I didn't like how catty she was towards a lot of the women. And despite not being an interesting player, I thought the whole scandal with Cody was definitely overblown, since there are people who actually cheated on their partners and never got anywhere close to that amount of backlash. But I get that a lot of the backlash came from her being unlikable. What frustrated me so much about her is that she knew what moves needed to be made and the right way to play the game, but she almost always caved whenever she was given the opportunity to actually have some self-interest in the game. So it's just really frustrating watching her throughout the entire season. Despite that, I don't think she deserved to get anywhere near the amount of backlash and vitriol that she got, especially compared to many of the others in the season. Week 11 is literally a week where no one goes home. How can it get any worse than that? So the Big Brother Rewind is introduced, which is just a reason to have an extra week in the season, since this season is a week longer than BB15. They talk more about Cody and Christine's relationship and trashing Christine. Mainly, Caleb and Frankie are doing this, and I don't know why they're showing this, but Cody didn't see any of it like that, and Derek also mentioned that he didn't like Christine at all. The other house guests are plotting to boot Frankie, and Frankie is aware that he needs to win out because they tried to backdoor him last week. And he does end up winning HOH. The house pushes the button, and I'm sure they would have been pressured to push it anyways, even if they didn't want to. Derek is gassing Victoria up about being the most remembered BB16 woman, which isn't true actually, and Frankie speaks to the Alliance about how Cody has protected him the least. Jeff and Jordan enter the house, and a lot of time is spent on this, since he proposes to her. A country singer comes in the house to sing, and I also think that they put so much time on the episode on this because there's nothing happening in the house. Frankie nominates Victoria and Cody for eviction. Frankie is seriously targeting Victoria because he wants to go to the Final Four with the boys, and she served her purpose, though he knows his entire alliance is after him, which is just a really, really bad move on his part, and also plays into his overconfidence as well. And Derek is planning on booting her, since Cody can win more competitions and is more useful to him. Victoria talks about her game, strategy and social game, where the editors completely shit on her, and she mentions that she was working side by side with Derek, which just isn't true at all. Caleb admits that he thought about sending Cody home, and this makes Cody even more worried, and he speaks to Derek about potentially sending Caleb home this week if Derek vetoes Cody, but Derek predicts that the timer will not make Frankie safe. Caleb has a huge issue this season from just running his mouth way too much and not knowing how to filter himself, going all the way from the beginning, and it's a really bad trait to have. The scripted diary rooms are literally killing me at this point, with the over-the-top yelling and the off-phrasing of everything. Frankie wins the veto, and Cody is regretting not sending Frankie home, though a bunch of people realize that Frankie is the one to beat and to take out. There's so much filler happening in the episode, especially since Frankie isn't going to use the veto, hoping that it will show loyalty. Frankie doesn't use the veto. Frankie is taking Victoria out because he knows everyone can beat her at the end, and if he's nominated beside her next week, he will go home, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Victoria starts crying since he knows that she is going home, and finds it odd that Frankie is all of a sudden close with Cody. Derek is spending more time with Victoria during the week, since he knows that she's going to the jury house. There is more talk about the twist with the button and booting Frankie. Frankie asks Derek who Cody is taking to the end, and Derek responds in a way that Frankie, Cody, and Caleb all have an equal shot at winning, and Frankie knows that Derek is saying this to lessen his own threat level, and Frankie knows that Derek can win the game. Derek tells Victoria to pretend to be mad at him, so people don't assume that she's an automatic vote for him at the end, and she does it to Frankie. Julie reveals that there's no eviction and that the last week will be repeated with the same competitions. I just want to get this over with, and week 12 is just as awful and boring as all the other weeks. The rewind happened, and everyone agrees to keep the same plan, which is to boot Victoria, though Derek and Cody are insistent on booting Frankie. Caleb ends up winning the HOH, and Frankie is hoping that Cody and Victoria will be nominated again. Frankie solidifies his final two with Caleb, and when he asks Caleb if the nominations will be the same, the latter doesn't answer the question, so Caleb is clearly lying. Caleb tells Derek that he's considering not nominating Frankie, but Derek is insistent that Frankie needs to be on the block. Caleb tells Cody that he isn't putting him up, but is thinking of putting Derek up as a pawn to send Frankie home as a replacement, which Cody doesn't see as ideal. Victoria and Derek are continuing their ploy of pretending to be mad at one another, since Victoria was supposed to go home, and the plan was only supposed to be done for a day and a half until she enters the jury house, but that can't happen now. Cody complains to Derek about Caleb and Frankie, and they are planning to get Caleb to turn on Frankie. The hitman convinced Caleb that if Frankie wins the veto, he'll take Victoria off, so Caleb is now fearful of keeping him off the block. We have a luxury competition, and the jurors come back in the house to dirty it up. And I don't really care to discuss anything else pertaining to this. Literally, the entire Final Five and most of the jurors are just screaming in the diary room, and I want to slam my head on the table. We have some more filler in the episode, and Frankie makes his pitch to Caleb, but it is to no avail, as Caleb nominates Frankie and Victoria for eviction. Frankie knows that he's going home if he does not win the veto, and he knows Caleb is giving him a bunch of BS excuses. Cody and Derek come outside and are annoyed that Caleb isn't shutting the hell up and not doing a good job of explaining himself, so he is unintentionally ratting them out. Cody wins the veto, and it's obvious that the nominations aren't going to change, which is done at the ceremony. Frankie pitches to the hitman that he'll go after Caleb for how he handled his HOH. As a last-ditch effort, Frankie decides to threaten his allies that he will taint the jury if they boot him, which they obviously and rightfully do not appreciate. Frankie tells Caleb that he knows nothing about what's happening in the house, which is correct. Caleb says that he would smoke Frankie at the end, which is incorrect. Frankie is evicted in a unanimous 2-0 vote, and they apparently filled the audience with CBS staff to prevent him from getting booed. I think because I'm not watching feeds and just focusing on the episodes, Frankie came off as more tolerable when I rewatched the season, though there were definitely a lot of moments where he was very irritating and very attention grabbing. I do think that he's a good player as he's a good competitor. He understands strategy very well and knows how to be social, but I do think that he tends to overestimate his skill sets a bit and is blind to things that he shouldn't be blind about, and is woefully blind to it as well. A lot of people kind of blame him with the change of Big Brother over the last 9 years, since it became a lot more about influencers, bringing in a different audience, and over-the-top flashiness in how they present themselves that isn't very genuine. Anyways, I don't really care to hate him as much as I disliked him 9 years ago. So overall, he's kind of just and a slight annoyance at worst. Though as a player, I found him to be one of the most interesting. Derek wins the HOH, and it's obvious that he isn't going to nominate Cody. Derek tells Victoria that they have to continue their act, so it makes sense as to why she's going on the block. Derek asks Cody if he wants to go up, and Cody says no. They trash Caleb and how he doesn't deserve to win the game, and when he speaks to Caleb, Derek gets Caleb to volunteer to go on the block. Derek obviously nominates Caleb and Victoria for eviction. Derek starts the veto competition, and we have a segment where everyone mentions that Derek having their bag and how he's going to go so hard in this competition. Cody wins the final veto of the season, and Caleb is cheering as he's expecting to be taken to the final 3. Cody doesn't feel bad for cutting Caleb, since Caleb cut Frankie, who was in his final 2, and it was dumb on his part, which is true. Cody obviously doesn't use the veto and votes to evict Caleb. It's kind of weird that I dislike him more now than I did 9 years ago, and I didn't like him at all back then. The Amber stuff was obviously very cringy, and now that I grew up more, I definitely saw a lot of the gaslighting and the threats that were more subtle when I was watching live 9 years ago. The entitlement that he felt he had towards everything in the game, and I didn't find him funny at all, even when they were trying to give him a comedic edit during the second half of the season. As a player, he was completely moronic, with volunteering to be on the block several times, blatantly ignoring information that was right in his face, making moves that were not in his best interest several times, and continuously saying too much. I don't know if he's a mediocre player or a bad player, so that's something that I'm going to have to figure out soon before making the next video. Week 13 is the culmination of what you thought would have happened 10 weeks ago finally happening. The plan was for Cody to win part 1 and for Derek to win part 2, but Derek tries to get Cody to hand him part 1, but he realizes that it isn't worth it, so Cody wins part 1. Derek wins part 2 of the final HOH, and Cody wins the final HOH overall, due to winning part 3, choosing to evict Victoria, which is seen as one of the dumbest moves in Big Brother history, though I'm sure that Cody doesn't regret it, since not only was he able to come back and for both of them to be winners, but I don't know that if Cody won this, that his brother would have been brought on Big Brother to create a reality TV career for himself. So, yeah, and I'm pretty sure Cody cared more about the branding of himself and Derek than winning, and things clearly worked out towards his favor. Victoria was very catty throughout the season and didn't offer much of anything. She was very delusional about her game, she thought she was doing a lot more than she really was, and no one respected her from the very beginning. She was carried by Derek and the others, seeing her as a non-threat, and I believe she took Spencer's record for being the most nominated in the season, so there's that. I don't really have anything else to say about Victoria, so I'm just going to move on, and I didn't enjoy her presence in the season. Christine asks Derek, denying his responsibility in sending people home, where the jury feels like he was responsible, and Derek admits that he had influence in every nomination and eviction, but it was his plan to be behind the scenes to not get blowback. Frankie asks Cody about Derek puppeting him during the season, and if he's wrong, since that's how the jury perceives it. And Cody mentions that his game was social, and that this was funny because he was the sole reason as to why Caleb turned on Frankie. And the Calafiore overconfidence definitely shows here, and it's a very poor answer, and I don't even know if it's true. And he played just as good as Frankie. Caleb asks Derek about him using his family to manipulate the house guest, and if he felt like doing so crossed the line. And Derek responds that he never uses family as a strategy, as they mean the world to him. Hayden asks Cody about the big strategic move he made, and Cody responds about Zach being on the block and telling Derek to call Christine out, which caused Jocasta to go home, and the people targeting them followed. Nicole asks Derek why he deserves to win over Cody, and Derek mentions that Nicole was the few to completely acknowledge the game, and Derek mentions that he was never nominated in the season. Donnie asks Cody why he should win over Derek, and Cody responds that his social game is a huge part as to why they got to the end, and people were feeding him a lot of information pre-jury, which he fed to Derek, as he had to trust of the entire house. Victoria asks Derek if it was his plan the entire time to remain loyal to Cody over her, and Derek mentions that he wanted to bring her as far as he could without breaking loyalties, but he cannot betray Cody and expect the jury to vote for him, but she will be his friend for life. Cody's final speech is about how it hurts that he was viewed as a puppet, but he respects everyone, but he played the game to gain the trust of all the jurors, which is why a lot of the choices happen in the house, and the quote-unquote puppet helped send home comp beasts Frankie and Caleb. Derek's final speech is about how he played the best social game he could, and his key was never able to be removed from the memory wall, and how he won 4 HOHs, which is why he deserves to win Big Brother. Derek wins the season in a 7-2 vote. Obviously, Cody is a good Big Brother character, but I was actually shocked at how much lower I view him as a player based on this Big Brother 16 iteration. There are so many opportunities that he had to have his own agency and to make his own choices and to give himself more options, but he reported everything to Derek, and he did everything that Derek wanted him to do, even if his gut was telling him to do something different. As a character, he definitely wasn't really interesting at all, and I could definitely see why his brother ended up doing more reality shows than he did, since it's just not in Cody's nature. And I kept on comparing their diary rooms, and I noticed a huge difference where it came off as a lot more natural for Polly compared to Cody. But in general, he was the inoffensive presence in the season, and he was a looker, so he was obviously going to make it far. But Cody naturally has the skills to do well in Big Brother, but he definitely was very overconfident at times, and definitely had some of that Calafiore attitude, which he isn't really noted for. Derek was no surprise. He was very boring throughout the season, and he actively made things more boring with telling the other house guests to handle things behind the scenes, lying in the diary room, and just not really having fun with backstabbing people, like a Dan or a Dr. Well were with how they played the game. Though I guess you can't blame him because he was grieving his grandfather while the season was happening, but even beforehand, he was kind of just the way he was. It was very easy to predict that he would win from damn near the very beginning, so it didn't make things fun at all. Overall, Derek deserved to win, and he played perfectly, though it would have been interesting to see how he would handle things if he wasn't in power or if things didn't go his way, like some of the other top-tier players. Wow, that season was so painful to rewatch. The casting of the women were extremely weak, and a lot of the guys were painful as well and weren't strong casting choices in my opinion either. This was the season that they showed so many times in Sequester in future seasons, and I think they might have recently just stopped showing it in Sequester, so it influenced a lot in the future seasons. For obvious reasons with Big Brother 18 and Big Brother 22, and kind of Big Brother 17 with Battle of the Block returning, but it would be the start of over half of the house getting into an alliance and kind of running it out. I think they overcorrected from Big Brother 15, but there's still a lot of problematic elements in the season. And especially with it being so long and the seasons getting longer around this point, it makes the experience even more draining. As of right now, this season is most definitely dead last, and I don't know if that will ever change, but maybe I'll be surprised in a positive or a negative way as I finish the remaining 9 seasons. Thank you all for watching and supporting, and I'll be back to rank the Big Brother 16 gameplay, and hopefully I'll get the ranking of the post-classic era house guests up soon, and I'll also move on to Big Brother 17 as well. So thank you all, and take care. Bye!